Robert, I don't think this is very funny. Bobby. Who is this?
As you watch the screen, your heart begins to beat faster. There's a fluttering in the pit of your stomach. Your throat is dry. Your palms damp. Suddenly a chill runs down your spine. You clutch the person next to you. You tell yourself, it's only a movie. It's only a movie. But sooner or later, it's time to go home.
Welcome to Film Strip. I'm Jay.
And I'm Brian.
And this is our review of Leprechaun 4 in Space, starring Warwick Davis, Brent Jasmine, Jessica Collins, Gary Grossman, Rebecca Carlton, Tom Colseri, Miguel Nunez Jr., Debbie Dunning, and Guy Center. Directed by Brian Trenchard Smith, the guy that did the third one. Released in February of 1997 on a budget of $1.6 million, direct to video, so we don't have any box office numbers, but I can tell you, for the third film in a row, the Leprechaun series has scored a 0% approval rating on Rotten Tomatoes. There's got to be some kind of a freaking record. They went from 27% in the first one to 0. I mean, it's hard to shoot that many blanks in a row.
Well, apparently not. I don't know. I'm curious as to, after the first, well, I guess the second and third films were panned so much, who gave the green light for a fourth one? And then, after that one gets panned so much, who gives the green light for a fifth and a sixth one? I don't get it.
I don't either. I did read one little interesting piece of trivia about this, and Anna and I mentioned this at the end of our When a Stranger Calls remake episode, was that essentially one of the ways this film got made is the Apollo 13 poster got released, and an artist drew the Leprechaun's face on it, and then someone said, yes, go with that. And
wow.
That's one of the ways that happened. Like a senior at the Trimark, at Trimark Studios or whatever, saw that and thought it was fantastic and said, yes, go for it. Let's start a script for that. And that's how they got here. But gosh, what a weird series, Brian. I mean, we talked about last time that we were going to go in space and then that was going to be it, because you and I were done with this. But like you mentioned there in the intro, there are two more In the Hoods coming up, and there's also a remake in the works, as we understand.
It's not really a remake. It's a Origins film.
Haven't we done that?
It's called Leprechaun The Origins, and believe it or not, it's being produced by the WWE and Lionsgate Films, and it's going to star that shrimp that wrestles called Hornswoggle as the Leprechaun, of all things.
They're not even going to bring Warwick Davis back. Wow.
Well, I mean, I'm sure he's made a ton of money off of this, and they can't justify paying him for something that's going to just flop. I mean,
I suppose so. But the fact that they're bothering to do that reboot, Origins, whatever you call it, and that it's done by WWE Films, which you and I also have a weird bastardized relationship with because of our WrestleMania tie-in podcast that we like to do. I guess we'll go ahead and spill it now. We're going to go back to the hood. We're going to do Leprechaun 5 and 6, even though we've said for 3 podcasts we weren't going to.
Yeah, well, just there's something to look forward to next, St. Patty's Day, and of course, again, next Halloween, we'll get that, and that'll be just enough time for that piece of crap that the WWE, I'm sure, is going to put out to have not only flopped in the theater, but made it to video in time for WrestleMania / St. Patty's Day of 2014. 14.
Yeah. So we've got a long series planned here. So this isn't the end, but it is the end of being on Earth. And I, before we get any more into this, I guess it's worth it to attempt a plot summary. So I'm going to let you do that one,
right.
And then let's come back and talk about the fact that it's Leprechaun not on Earth.
Well, after watching this movie, Jay, I couldn't even begin to formulate a plot summary myself. So I just went out and found one. And so this is what they have given it as plot summary. Let's see what you think after we're done here. On a distant planet, a power-hungry leprechaun kidnaps a Dominion princess, Princess Zarina, and plans to make himself king. But not if a bumbling brigade of space marines have anything to say about it. Their commander is a mad scientist by the name of Dr. Mittenhand, who's half machine thanks to one of his experiments. Once on the planet, Leprechaun is blown up, but quickly is reborn through one of the Marines. And wreaks havoc aboard the ship. Meanwhile, Dr. Mittenhand plans to use the princess for his experiments to make himself whole again. But now, after many of the Marines are killed, Leprechaun turns Dr. Mittenhand into a grotesque monster and plans to blow up the ship. The remaining Marines have to stop his evil plans to blow him up instead. Wow.
Someone tried to lend a lot of credence to this story that it does not have, nor should have ever had. Now, there's someone named Dennis Pratt that supposedly wrote this, and I can only hope that whatever he bought with what he got paid to write it was very nice, because this is that is so much more intelligible than what we actually saw. I mean, I think you've hit it. There's no way to even really describe what this movie is. I think the thing that I just kind of get to here, and when I think about this movie, is that there's no part of it at all that is on Earth. All right, which we've seen the Leprechaun work in, I guess, other dimensions and maybe ancient Earth. If you think back to the second one and some of what happens in the third one and some of that stuff, but we've never seen it where he's gone intergalactic. But they don't even set it up. Like, how did he get in space? Did he get wished there? Who cares? This is almost as cool, and I'll give this film credit for that, because it's almost as fun as the way they do 3 with the pirate hobo and his statue that walks in the pawn shop. That's the only opening I liked more than this one, is the fact that they just throw us in there and it's him and a girl again, but this time she seems to be somewhat into it, which is even stranger.
Well, yeah, it's very strange. But what I found odd was he's in a cave that's exactly like the cave from the last movie that he lived in, right?
Right.
On this weird planet, Dominion, or whatever it's called. And he's in a cave that's identical to what he had on Earth. Okay. But yes, you mentioned the princess. Well, we learned what the princess is all about. She's all about power and money, or gold in this case, which I guess equates to money. Once he lures her with the thought of becoming queen and all the riches she can desire, she seems to not really care that he's an ugly, short being that really is out for her money, as long as she gets her piece.
Yeah, it's like the marriage of convenience. And I want to say, hey, good job, Leprechaun. You finally figured out what the Clintons and many other, which probably shouldn't say that, what many politicians have figured out years ago.
And she doesn't even have to sneeze 3 times without a blessing.
I know, there's none of that. I guess maybe that doesn't apply to her Dominia people or whatever.
It's probably not the same rules in space,
What rules, Brian? There are no freaking rules in this series. We've talked about the lack of rules in this series. I promised myself I wasn't going to fuss about the lack of rules in the series, because they don't know what's going on. And it doesn't even matter that the guy that directed the last one's doing this one. He doesn't even clearly never watched that movie again. So they just sort of throw it all out and start over every time. And I'm going with that for as much as I can go with what this is. All right. What I can't go with, and what I just sort of stop at, is, and I laughed at it when you read it in that plot summary, is the Space Marine bit. Okay?
Yeah.
This is 1997, okay? We're in the heels of 11 years after another big Space Marine movie that we've talked about on Film Strip, Nick and I did Aliens, and then there was Alien 3, and then Alien Resurrection came out in 97 too, and it had a similar ragtag group of space mercenaries and their wacky adventures with alien beings. And all I can think of is, as dunderheaded as that movie was, this one, it even goes further. It's so much worse. And everything that happens in this film makes no sense beyond the opening bit of how he lures the princess. But you mentioned the gold bit. They throw that totally away. At no point is this about somebody stealing the leprechaun's gold. Hell, he's barely in this movie until the last 20 minutes. It's about Dr. Mittenhand and all of that goofy Saturday morning cartoon stuff.
We get introduced to these ragtag idiots with the first thing we see is this guy with a half metal skull, and he's the leader. Right, yeah. He's the main guy of this group until, of course, he questions a doctor who comes in to be part of the crew, and then we meet the actual leader, which is this really piss poor German accent guy who you only ever see the head of. It's almost like he's Big Brother. He comes on the screen and he can hear everything you do because he just pops on the screen and then starts giving orders. It was really odd.
This is the idea of the scientist government that runs the military thing. Now that the military are basically outsourced, contractors to entities like himself, wealthy entrepreneurs. It'd be like the guy that owns Virgin Airlines having his own Marines,
Right. It reminded me of like a mix of 1984, Dune, and Aliens.
Yeah,
you take all those and throw them together.
There's a little bit of that.
Parts.
Yeah, and he's also got this whole and I know this is before, or is this before Dr. Evil and all
Austin
of that?
Powers, yeah,
Austin Powers
was a year or two later.
Okay, so then this is the Bond guy ripoff. This is Blofeld because he was bald. There's all of that. It's all of that stuff. It's the tropes of when you see him immediately, he's someone that we're supposed to hate. Yeah, it's a card played so far in advance. But then, like you said, we meet this group of Marines, and you talk about a motley bunch. You mentioned the guy with the plate in his head, the Michael Ironsides ripoff. You got him. You have the guy with the books, the guy with the name, Brent Jasmer, who's I mean, they just looked for excuses to get this guy's guns on the screen because he kept taking his shirt off. That was his whole thing.
He was the Stallone wannabe.
Yeah, exactly. And he had some Stallone and Shatner-esque acting going on too. And then you have Styx, Miguel Nunez Jr., who's like a knockoff of the guy from the Police Academy movies that makes all the noises, and Orlando Jones. I mean, that's kind of who he is.
Nice.
And I know I've seen him. The only thing I know him else from is he was Joanna Man. If you've ever seen that, the NBA player that poses as a woman to play in the WNBA.
No, I've not seen that, but I recognized him right away from Scooby-Doo, the movie. He was the voodoo man who is sacrificing the dead chicken.
Good point. I forgot that. So, yeah, he's in that. You have those guys are the Marines, and they're led by this doctor, Tina Reeves, Jessica Collins, who comes on, and she's like the Dynasty bimbo. That's exactly what I thought of when she walked on the screen. She is that era of person. She's about 10 years out of cast.
Yeah, I didn't even know what to make of her. All I know is I figured we'd probably be seeing her naked because that's what we do in these Leprechaun movies, and we didn't even get that.
We don't get that. The only person
but...
we get slight nakedness from is the princess, and we're going to talk about that when we get there.
Yeah, that's a fun one.
Yeah, there's a whole other conversation to that. But what are they? They're exploring something on this planet Dominia. And they run across the leprechaun and this princess. They're there to, like, collect the princess because she has rejuvenative power. I wasn't clear as to why they attacked.
No, I don't think they knew anything about the princess. I think that they had some kind of obviously Dr. Mitten, whatever the hell his name is, he knew about the princess. But I think that they said there were some alien life forms on this planet and they had to go check them out. And that's why they went down there. And then, of course, they find the room that he's basically trying to coax the princess into marrying him in, and they find all the gold, and then that's when we get the fun stuff.
We get the firefight. Yes, these the guns that are definitely from the 20th century firing the 21st century laser beam. And that's another thing. When the hell is this? Is this 2414? They don't even say, do they? Do they tell us a time?
No, we have no idea when this is.
It just
I mean, it's got to be in the 70s, right?
Well, that's certainly the technology, because it looks like a battle off of like the old Star Trek. I mean, like the TV 60s Shatner-esque, you know? I mean, it's got that kind of quality to it. It almost reminded me of some of the gun battles, if you've ever seen the movie Critters. It's sort of along that lines, too.
But do the Marines suck in that, too?
Well, yeah, they do. Well, actually, no, those guys are actually pretty decent, but they just blow stuff up for, reasons that don't matter. But in all of this, they throw a grenade, and the Leprechaun, to save his woman, and I'm like, man, the Leprechaun has changed M.O. totally, jumps on the grenade. He doesn't throw the girl on it. He doesn't build a cage around it magically. This is a guy with magic, okay? And he throws himself on the grenade and is blown to bits 5 minutes into the movie.
Yeah, and before that even happens, Jay, what do we see? He pulls out his little shillelagh, and it turns into a freaking lightsaber. A lightsaber. And he goes and chops off one of the guy's legs with it, and then, after that, it turns into a freaking machine gun.
Why does the Leprechaun need a gun?
Why does he need any of this stuff?
A laser sword. I mean, I said 2 podcasts ago I wanted to see this just to see the Leprechaun with a lightsaber, because I was having Yoda in episode 2 flashbacks. Oh, it's not even that cool. It's not even close to that stuff.
No.
It's horrible. You and I could do this on our computer at home and make it look better. I've seen better YouTube lightsaber fights than what he does. But it turns into a gun, and then he throws himself on a grenade. That's
very noble of him.
I know, but for no reason. Like, it's crazy. And in the process of that, Zarina loses a hand, too. Which is, and I'm like, what's happening here? This is so weird. It's just the weirdest end to a battle.
And then the best part is that as they're like celebrating the fact that they've blown this alien up and rescued this princess, the guy goes and starts pissing on a leprechaun's dismembered leg, and you look over and there's Leprechaun smiling the whole time and looking at him, and then he zaps the crap out of his junk.
Yeah, which I knew immediately then, this is how he's going to regenerate himself somehow. And when that happens later, I just shook my head. It's one of the many times I did watching this, but you knew that wasn't going to end well.
No.
Because, of course it can't. I mean, and this is clearly a film made way before, we became more aware of our terrorist wars and stuff like that. Yes, this is a great way to predict our depict our Marines, right? They win, and then they take a piss on the enemy. That's I know Marines.
Hey,
and they're hardcore, but they don't do that stuff. So,
there's some that went on.
Yeah, I know, but the whole point is that that's going to be the comeuppance, and that's the way. Oh, that's a terrible way of saying it, but that's the way the Leprechaun is going to be reborn. Because you spoiled it already.
Yeah.
He basically is reborn through the guy's dick, which is really weird.
It's terrible. Well, okay, before we get to that, we're back on the ship, and everyone's celebrating this fact that they've destroyed this alien by drinking a few beers in a full-fledged discotheque on the ship.
All the things that have survived, hair gel, apparently, hairspray, and disco has survived, and Budweiser has survived. It's into the future. I, at this point, am blown away by what I'm seeing.
And now we know how they made this movie. They got corporate sponsor from Budweiser.
No, I didn't even see a good label. It was like the fake Bud label, but it was still the same thing. Like the point is, we now have to have a scene with guys in a bar because that's what they do.
Yeah. And, of course, the slutty Marine chick.
Yeah, exactly. There's the one Marine, Debbie Dunning, who I only know from multiple wall calendars in college and Home Improvement. Home Improvement. And she's there to basically hit on one of the other, jockhead Marines, the guy that was taking a leak on the Leprechaun's body. That's the whole bit. And
apparently on some other Marines too, as we'll find out later.
Yeah.
But yes, this was their big scene. They head out to deck 5 and start making out, and then what happens, Jay? Yep, the Leprechaun starts being reborn out of the junk of the Marine.
Kowalski starts to give
Wow.
birth. Now, I know that the conceit and the Hollywood trick of if you want to bring someone out of somebody else's body, you put them up against a wall because then you can do the whole facade and all that stuff. It's so poorly set up here that I was like, oh, he must fall against that wall because it's the only way Warwick Davis can climb through the fake pants. And then and he bursts through that. But you know what? The thing that killed me, this is direct to video, so what the hell do they care about, what happens in it? Why is there no blood? Is there no blood in space? That should have been gory, and it was not.
You're right. It should have been very disgusting, too. But I don't know.
Maybe they didn't have the budget for it. I mean, $1.6 million is
Well,
fine. That second one, though, remember we talked about in the second film how gory that film had become.
Correct, yeah.
And they have really, and the third one, too, had some gore in it. This one has, less.
This director, when he took over the franchise to do the third one, and I assume the fourth one, was trying to get away from the gore and go more to the comedy of it.
Well, clearly, because
and that failed big time with 3.
Yeah, and it's failing here, too. Let's not give this film any credit. This is not funny at all, because you see it all. The problem is it's all telegraphed. You see all of this coming from a mile away. And you knew that's how he's going to be reborn. And, of course, he has this whole fight with Debbie Dunning. And then he gets into a gunfight with Debbie Dunning again. Now, this man the Leprechaun has already shown us he's got so much magic he can be reborn out of somebody's penis. That now he's got to pick up a 9 and start blasting.
Hey, whatever works. I don't get it. My favorite part, though, is after she escapes and he's alone, he starts spouting off some poetry to himself. What the hell's the point of that?
I know.
I don't get it. We need some lines for work. Let's just write a poem.
Yeah, and it's the only time he does anything like that, too. Gone are the limericks and all that stuff. As
It's
dumb
terrible.
as those were, that was trademark, and they're gone. And I was like, what? When's he going to start doing that? He didn't even have good puns. It's like Warwick Davis is phoning this in, and I'm like, hell, if he's phoning this in, why is this even getting made?
Yeah, no, but coming up next, Jay, is probably my favorite part of the movie, the flesh-eating bacteria room. First off, my question is, how the hell did Leprechaun get a suit his size on this ship? Because I'm pretty sure they didn't have one in storage for a short person. Probably knew what their cargo was going to be. So anyway, he's got a suit. And why is he sitting in the flesh-eating bacteria room to begin with? And whose dumbass idea is it to go in there?
Oh, that's the Marines' idea. Like, they make a big deal out of that. But yeah.
Hello? So dumb. So, then, of course, Stallone clone, of course, has to be Mr. Macho. And he's got to, she's supposed to go in there because she's the smallest one. And he's got to be all macho and say, no, I'll take care of it. I'll go in there. And, of course, she can't let him be all macho. So they both go in together. Or no, I'm sorry. They have one guy who
they take another guy in, and he goes in instead of her. Yeah.
He wants to impress her. So he goes in with this other guy. And, of course, what happens? The other guy's suit busts open, and all of a sudden, every piece of flesh within a matter of 2 seconds is removed from this guy's body. That is some hell of a flesh-eating bacteria, dude.
You say removed. It's like they say, hey, dude, don't tear your suit. This stuff will eat you alive. And then all of a sudden he tears his suit. We hear him scream. They run to the airlock. And then the next shot is a cutaway to Stallone clone, then back to the fake plastic skeleton that they've stuck in the guy's suit. That's how that transpires.
That is some kick-ass bacteria, dude.
Dude, you and I could have shot that, though. That's what I'm trying to say. It's like, this is so amateur. This is below amateur. And that's what's killing me. I'm like, look, I know this movie didn't have a lot of money. It doesn't have a greater point. It's not trying to tell a great story. It's just supposed to be fun. But it's not even doing that because they're setting up the joke so heavy-handed. Again, it's like they tell us, don't get any of this stuff on you, man. It'll kill you. And then what happens? It gets one of them. And you knew it wasn't going to be Stallone clone. It was going to be the other guy that nobody cares about.
Right. And okay, so then we're in a different area, and Kowalski's talking with Nympho Soldier Girl about how, she's talking about how terrible it was that he had to die that way. And of course, Kowalski's all like, well, if I had my choice, I'd like to go out with a boner too. right? And so she gets all horny. She's like ready to give him one, and then he totally turns her down.
I know, which makes no sense at all. I'm like, hey, you've been trying to nail anything on the ship the whole time, and now you're so bummed that your buddy has been eaten by the flesh bacteria, which, by the way, there was a purpose set up for that. That's how they get rid of their waste. Don't flush it into space, kids. Let's be green. I mean, that's what this is trying to do. And now he turns her down.
Yeah.
In the meanwhile, though, we learned something here. We learned that Princess Serena can grow her appendages back, kind of like a gecko.
That's right.
And that's when Dr. Mittenhand gets real excited, because that's how he's going to regrow himself. All these experiments. And
her blood and DNA, it's blue.
Yeah, it's like this milky blue color, you know?
It's the color of the delicious milk on Tatooine.
Yeah, it looks exactly like it. Probably left over from that shoot, oddly enough. Yeah, and that's what
we made this crap and don't know what to do with it. How about you guys?
Just laying in the back. Yeah, I mean, who knows, right? But that's exactly what happens, is that it's this... You get all of this set up, and that's how they figure out that the queen or the princess or whatever is regenerative or whatever. And they don't ever really do anything else with that. Like, I wanted them to cut her in half and then like two of her show up, you know, or something later. They didn't do any of that stuff. So
they didn't. But again, you know, the only thing they really used that for was to try and build the whole Mittenhand storyline, so that he could grow his body back. Of course, we don't know any of this yet, because he hasn't really exposed himself to us until all the Marines are sitting there and they get in a fight with each other, and he has to actually literally come out. They were fighting with him because their last day was that day under contract, and they were going to take the shuttle off the ship and go home, and he kept yelling at him, "You cannot do this. I own your contract." Da, 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 da. And so then he finally comes out and exposes himself to be this basically half of a chest and a head, one arm, and the rest of him is a metal box.
A metal box? You mean a cardboard box painted silver, like you would make for your kids if they wanted to be Robbie the Robot for Halloween?
Right.
I mean, that's what this the effect on this is so cheap, and it's so. I was getting all kinds of, like, you know, Captain Pike flashbacks from the old Star Trek, and some of this stuff, you know, one beep once for yes, two for no. I mean, it's the evil scientist that has this altar plan that no one knows about, and he's just using the grunts to do his bidding. And the whole time I'm watching this going, it's like there's two movies. And they had Leprechaun, like, we should put Leprechaun in space. Yes, what do we do with that? I don't know. Well, we get this Space Marine movie. Maybe we should just slam them together. Like, that happened at 3 in the morning at the Waffle House, and that's how they came up with this idea. Because you've really got two stories.
Makes as much sense.
Yeah, that have nothing to do with one another. I mean, there's no reason at all for the Leprechaun to be here. I mean, as arbitrary as he has been in films that are his namesake, this one by far is more like in space, kind of, with the Leprechaun, instead of Leprechaun in space.
Yeah, for sure. He is rarely in this movie, and all he's really doing is crawling around the innards of a ship and getting into little battles with the Marines the whole time. The rest of it is all on the experiments that this Mittenhand is doing. You see him with a shrink ray and a enlarger ray. I don't even know what to call it. But
the Honey, I Shrunk the Kids laser?
Yes.
Yeah, exactly what that thing
They take the gold that they stole from the Leprechaun. This is this is the only time we actually see gold since the beginning of the movie in this movie, and they shrink it into a little, like, pizza roll size, right? And then they re-enlarge it, and they get all excited. Why? I'm not quite sure, because it doesn't ever come back to play in this movie until they actually blow the shit up of the Leprechaun.
Right. It's only until the end, when they do what they do to the Leprechaun, does this come back. But it's like I've said with everything else, Brian, they set all this stuff up because that's what they've been told in script writing class that you do. You show a gun in the first act, in the third act it goes off. The problem is, it's like, here's the gun that's going to go off in the third act. It's so obvious that you just are waiting for the gag. And like you said, all the Leprechaun's doing is running around and coming up with these ridiculous ways to kill people. He throws Debbie Dunning off of a high place. He has a big metal box, drop on one other dude. We talked about the guy that gets the flesh-eating bacteria. I mean, he comes up with these unique, weird ways to take out half the Marines.
That scene where he throws Debbie Dunning off and they all go look at her, and that had to be 3-4 story fall at minimum.
Yeah,
she's down there. They go up to her. What does she do? She grabs Stallone clone by the throat and says, "Kill him," before actually dying. Really?
Oh, of course. She had to get a line. I'm sure it was in her contract that she had to have this great death scene, and this is what they gave her. It's horrible. It's so bad.
So it gets even better, Jay, because then Jessica Collins' character and Stallone clone are running around getting chased by the Leprechaun, and he's shooting like mad at this thing, and he misses constantly. And then he gets handcuffed to I don't even know what it is. He gets handcuffed to one of the bars in the ship, and he's shooting at the Leprechaun, trying to get him away so he doesn't kill him. And then he goes and shoots his handcuffs. And what does she say to him? "You're really good with that rifle." Really? You didn't just see him miss everything in sight?
Better yet.
Until it was close range.
You're in a spacecraft, which is a pressurized environment, and you're firing projectile weapons at random throughout the ship. When exposure to the air in the ship in one part of it will eat your flesh within seconds. I'm certain the hull's not that good. The hull integrity cannot be that good.
I sure hope you don't hit the window to that room.
That's another thing. There's glass all over this thing. This is no spaceship I've ever seen. Okay, it's so bad, and that's what I'm saying. It's like they had these two movies, and then maybe like a third thrown away Steven Seagal airplane heist movie thrown together. This is what we get, and the chases go nowhere. It's
nothing happens.
It's ridiculous. Yeah, and not even to mention the fact of two other really weird scenes that happen with the Leprechaun. He gets the metalhead guy, the guy with the big plate or whatever, and he essentially, what does he do? Hypnotize him or reprogram him or something, thinking he's like a transvestite hooker dancer. And we have this whole 10-minute thing where he's in drag, and they're having this whole showdown. Oh, God, it's horrible. Oh, it's terrible.
Only a sign of things to come.
Yeah. And
as we roll into the hood.
Or not, as it may be. But, I mean, this is terrible how that goes on, and how they finally are able to deactivate him when they basically electrocute him, and they realize he's mostly robot. And the whole thing about him is that he saved books once, and that's how he sustained all those injuries, and that I never appreciated the Sarge for what he was. And then they're like, okay, over it. And they're just done with the dude.
And rightfully so. They've got a Leprechaun to worry about.
Which they can't hit with the broadside of a barn.
Yeah. And of course, we got to mention the fact that they're all standing together for some dumb reason. And what happens? Princess Serena takes off her top. And just dangles her boobs around for no apparent reason. And of course, the doctor chick, the Jessica Collins character, knows exactly what that means.
Yes. If her people do that, it is a sign you're about to die. If you see their breasts, then that means you're to be destroyed.
Wow.
Wow. Really?
Wow.
Really?
And yet nothing happens.
Nothing happens except Dr. Middenhand gets his from because this is what we want now. We want the Leprechaun to do him in, right? So he can't just kill him or electrocute him or some other stupid shit like he's done to everybody else. He has to feed him a cocktail of Zarina's blood, a scorpion, and a spider that turns him into like this, Cronenberg-esque fly creature thing.
Yeah.
Where he's trying to reprogram the ship and eat flies at the same time.
And here's how dumb that whole thing is. Like, he and Leprechaun are actually working together here. And they've got, like, this deal going on. And then he tries to turn on Leprechaun. And Leprechaun's like, what? Oh, you're toast.
And why would they ever be in league with one another? It makes no sense.
It's all about power, right?
What?
So Leprechaun wants power. Mittenhand wants power. They work together, Now, you would think that the Leprechaun would be the one turning on Mittenhand, but apparently it's the other way around. But still, Just stupid.
Well, and but here's the real reason why we have to have Dr. Mittenhand become Dr. Mittenspider or whatever. Is so basically he can rip Tina's clothes off so she runs around the rest of the time in underwear and a black t-shirt. Because we've killed Debbie Dunning. We've already said that Zarina, if she shows you the goods, it's deadly to you. So we're going to kind of push her to the side anyway. So it's all about getting this doctor naked at some point, or somewhat naked, right?
Right.
That's
we got to have some more TNA.
Yeah, that's the whole bit, because we don't have enough of that crap going on. So there's that, and so you get Styx facing off with the Mitten Spider thing.
Okay, but you got to set that up because basically the Leprechaun sets the ship to explode.
Right.
And they've got X time to do it, and they've got to figure out how to unprogram it. And so he's apparently the brains of the operation. So he goes up to that cabin and tries to figure out the password, because apparently it's password protected. And so he tries to figure out the password while they're fighting off the Leprechaun. And let's take it away here. You know, we got Jessica Collins running around half naked, and we've got Styx trying to break the code. All the while, you have Leprechaun and Stallone Clone taking it out on each other, and Stallone Clone accidentally hits that little shrink ray, enlarger ray on the Leprechaun and makes him grow humongous.
Yes. So now you have giant Leprechaun, essentially. And that's the whole joke. Let's let the little person be huge. And so now he's a bigger threat to the guy who couldn't hit him when he was 3 feet tall. Now he can't hit him when he's 30 feet tall, or however big he's supposed to be.
Yes, he couldn't hit him with a gun.
Yeah, but he can hit him with that ray. You know, yeah. That's the setup for the giant climax that we have here on the ship.
Climax. So we got that all going on. They're fighting, trying to get rid of the Leprechaun. Over in the other end, half naked Jessica Collins, Tina, whatever her name is in the room with Styx trying to figure out this password. Of course, she's brains the operation. She can figure it out. And here comes Spider Mittenhand to attack them. Oh, dear God. And what happens is on the intercom, Stallone Clone says, "Open the hatch in Cargo Bay 1, right?" And they're like, "Are you sure?" He's like, "Just do it." So he's on his way, trying to lure Leprechaun to get him. He gets to the airlock door, opens it up, and closes it in the nick of time for the airlock to open, and it sucks out the Leprechaun, who's still giant, by the way, at this point.
Right. And the whole idea is that we're going to blow him out into space, and because of the pressure differential, he's going to essentially explode. And that's it. That's exactly what happens.
Correct.
All the while, Zarina, who's been kind of knocked unconscious in the middle of all of this, keeps coming to and back and forth with Stallone Clone. And she's happy, like, "Oh, he's dead. Yay. I think I'll keep the good-looking Stallone man." But she's sort of out of it. And then he just kind of dumps her, leaves her in the corner. And that's it. That's the last we see of her.
Yeah. They've now, Mittenhand has been eradicated.
Yeah, because Jessica Collins hits him with the what is it? Liquid nitrogen, just like Terminator 2.
Yeah,
and that blows him into pieces. And then the three of them together.
Which I gotta say, Jay.
Yeah,
I'm not sure exactly how liquid nitrogen works, but you don't just stand there in your bare clothes and spray that shit at someone and don't expect to get yourself a little
it was all over her. Yes, thank you. It was getting all over her and nothing happened. She didn't even lose a finger out of this thing. But then
apparently it doesn't affect her.
And then the three of them have to stand there and think of every ridiculous fourth grade word they can to try to break the. Is it password? Is it ship? Is it gold? Yes. Is it power? And they finally come up with wizard because, remember he said he was the wizard behind the curtain. Duh, that must be it. And of course that stops the self-destruct.
With what, like 2 seconds to go or something?
Hey, the computer that ran that ship looked like the one the dude in the pawn shop had that had all the info on
reminds me. That reminds me. Earlier in this movie, when the Doctor is first introduced, she starts taking some information from the Marines. Did you notice when she had that little folder thing open she was writing on, there's this like mini calculator glued to the back of that thing, and that was all that was in there.
Yes, it's like they picked that
awesome.
up at the production office off of some PA's desk and said, "Hey, we need to borrow that for a shot real quick." Sure, no problem. Just bring it back because I gotta have it.
I almost fell on the floor when I saw that. I was like, really?
I mean, you cheap. I mean, so cheap. But we're not done because they've blown all this stuff up. The three people who don't know how to fly the spaceship are left on the spaceship, and the last thing we see before Stallone, Clone, and Tina hook up and kiss finally is the remains of the Leprechaun's body, and his fist animates and shoots a finger at him, almost as if to say to the audience, "This is for you for making us do this."
Well, not only that, that had to be the worst CGI I have ever seen. It's like they took a paint program and said, draw a middle finger of a leprechaun, and it's pixelated to the extreme, and they just put it on the screen.
Oh, it's horrible. It's so horrible. And what I'm like, Styx didn't even get to hook up with Zarina. She should have come up there and at least like hooked up with him. You know, so he's just sort of standing over there watching these other two make out while they all get flipped off by the leprechaun. And my thought is, look, he's already shown he can reanimate himself. Why can't he just reanimate and like swallow the ship? I mean,
well, that's a good question. Maybe that's how he gets to the hood. All his body parts float down to Earth. But that was it. That was the end.
Yeah,
like nothing got resolved.
No,
nobody knows what happened to these Marines. Did they make it back home? Are they just stuck in space now?
Brian, nothing.
Styx?
What was there to resolve? We never set up how any of this happened to begin with.
It's true, but it kind of just ended, and you're kind of like, okay.
Yeah,
right.
I mean that was it, and we're at the end, and then the credits go, and I'm like, really? And here's the thing: this is the longest of the four of them. This movie is a painful 95 minutes.
I will tell you this though, Jay. It may have been the longest, but it was nothing compared to number 2 as far as length. Because that one felt like you were watching it for 15 hours. It just went on.
I agree.
And there was nothing compelling about that movie.
No, it wasn't. But you know what we said? The first one moved at a pace that made no sense, but at least it seemed like they were going for something.
Right.
The second one was terrible. The third one, like the review said, the first 40 minutes, you're like, what is this? And the last 45 are awesome. And that's exactly what happened. There was none of this that was awesome. Nothing about this experience was fun.
I will say this, Jay. Of all the last of the last 3, so the first one by far the best of the series,
Not even
and
close.
That's saying something. But this one, at least to me, I wasn't like sitting there getting ticked that I was watching it, and I wasn't unentertained. I was like asking myself, what the hell's going on? Constantly, and trying to figure something out. So I'll give it that. At least it wasn't like 2 where everything was just terrible.
True.
There was no shining anything in this. You had actual actors who had a little bit of ability in this one, which is a step up from most of the ones we've seen. And you had familiar faces in this one, so it was a little easier to get involved in it, because I've seen Jessica Collins before. I've seen Styx, the actor who played Styx, before. I can give Stallone clone a Stallone-like watch because it's a Stallone clone. So to me, that helped a little bit with this movie in the actual entertainment value of it. However, the story was terrible. The graphics were shit. I don't even know where to go.
Well, you're doing what I was going to set up for you there, and I'll just do it now. It's time to give our final recommendations, thoughts, and popcorn ratings. So what are yours continued for Leprechaun 4?
Well, like I said, at least on this one, I didn't feel like I had to sit there for the 95 minutes, and it felt like 95 minutes. I felt like this had a decent enough pace to keep me involved in it. The ending sucked. The graphics sucked. The story was terrible. You barely got any Leprechaun. 1 hour and 9 minutes into the movie, the Leprechaun finally realizes he needs to get his gold. That's the first time he's actually said, oh, they've got me gold, and goes looking for it. There was no purpose for the Leprechaun to even be in this movie. And so for that, I'm giving it an extra small popcorn. It's not burnt popcorn like 2 was. It can't be small popcorn because 1 blows this thing out of the water, but it wasn't as bad as 2 or 3. So it gets a little bit up there.
I'm going to say this. I feel like I'm in the reverse Star Trek world here, where only the, certain ones are good, like the even and the odds ones. I feel like only the odd ones have been good, or at least passable in this. The first one, the third one, and then the second and the fourth are just a whole level of crap below the other crap that this entire series is. And you say you didn't mind it. It at least went somewhere for you. I felt every single second of this movie. I flipped the counter on so many times while watching it, and I had to back up stuff because things would happen, and I'd go, wait a minute, what? And I'd rewind it. So I spent, 3 hours with this probably, where it was only 95 minutes long. Because what I only realized in going back is, no, they didn't set it up, and I didn't miss it. It's just not there. And this whole film, like I've said multiple times, and I have no proof of this because there's no material out there about it, it feels like multiple things that were slammed together and they just threw it out there because it's all about the joke. It's about the kitsch. Leprechaun in space, it'll be funny. But it's not. It's not really. It's so stupid and so ham-handed and so poorly set up that there's really no reason to care about any of it. There's nothing that I can hold on to in this series that makes me want to watch more of it. That's the problem I'm having with it. And so for me, this one is extra small and it's burnt, and it's just as burnt as the second one. It's terrible. And I hate it. And I can only think that the fact that we're going back to the hood, which means we've got to be going back in time and back to, Earth.
The 70s.
Yeah, and we know that it goes back to the 70s, and Ice-T, the original gangsta, is in it. That it's got to be an upgrade going forward, because as racially stereotypical as that film probably is, at least it'll be something better than what I've had here, because this is bad. This is just as bad as 2, and I can only hope that they get something from the first one again back into this, or at least what worked in the last half of the third one, that they get some of that back, because this series is becoming the most intolerable thing I've ever reviewed.
Yeah, and it has to be somewhat good because they decided to go back to the hood.
Yeah, it got its
so that
own
means
sequel.
they gave
yeah.
a sequel to it. Whereas the other ones are just more Leprechaun movies. This is an actual one that has a sequel.
And like we've known, just from trivia, at least there's one thing we know that carries into it. That statue with the necklace thing, that was in 3, the beginning of the pawn shop, it's gonna show up in the hood. Like we know that's
Jay, you're telling me there's continuity?
That's what I'm saying. If there's any hope I have at all, is that if they have continuity somewhere in this thing, I'm gonna give it a pass because these films have been the least contiguous series of films I've ever seen together. It's amazing that they even bear the same name.
It's amazing, yes, to say the least.
Or the most.
and then of course we get to look forward to the origin story. I mean, I'm just rolling through my head trying to figure out what the hell they're going to come up with for that. This is how Leprechaun got to be such a mean old bastard.
I can only imagine what that is. And I'm going to tell you now, I've seen the beginning of Leprechaun in the Hood before. I saw it coming on, and I didn't watch it because I thought, that'll be something we review one day, maybe. This was before we even really got into this series, and so I didn't watch any more of it. But they tell an origin at the beginning of Leprechaun in the Hood that I'm like, that's actually, and now knowing that and having seen these 4 films, it's the most satisfying origin we've ever been told. I'm going to tell you, we're in line for at least that next time around.
All right.
But we have to wait till March for that to happen because that's how we do things here on Film Strip. Brian and I like to space the pain. So
it's true.
Indeed we do. But you know what? I said before there was nothing about this that was satisfying. I take that back. It was satisfying talking about this with you. Talking about these movies with you is always a lot of fun, and I hope folks have gotten that because I've certainly enjoyed doing this podcast. And folks, we appreciate you downloading us and checking us out as always. Of course, you know where you can find more in the archive section of our website, continuousplaypodcast.com/movies. Man, we got all kinds of stuff in there. Not only the Grand Leprechaun series that we've got 4 episodes of now. We've got Noah Holds Barred and Ready to Rumble, a couple of wrestling podcasts. We've got I Know What You Did Last Summer and Valentine, a couple of horror movies in there. Anna and I just finished up When a Stranger Calls, those 3 films. Nick and I have done the Alien series and Blair Witch. And you go all the way back to the old stuff. We got Batman, romantic comedies. We got all kind of stuff in there for you that you can check out. And hey, if you're a fan of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, you can go check out our Buffy podcast, The Art of Slaying, over at theartofslaying.com. 4 seasons of episodes already there. Single episode reviews of the entire show, along with a few extras. And we've just started releasing our season 5 stuff as the release of this podcast. So tons of podcasts for you from the Continues to Play universe. We hope you'll keep checking us out because we certainly enjoy doing them. Until next time, for Brian, I'm Jay. Thanks for listening to Film Strip.
Thanks for listening to Film Strip. Visit our website, continuousplaypodcast.com, for more reviews and episodes.
It's only a movie. It's only a movie.
All content used or discussed in this podcast are the property of their respective owners and used under the Fair Use Act, Section 504c2, Title 17.